Hello, my name is Greta Archbold, and I am from New York City, New York. My agency is a professional development program, and I'm outstationed in the New York City Regional Office for Children and Family Services. My action research project focused on increasing kinship placements for children and youth who come into care through a kinship overview training. Just a little background about myself. I have been in child welfare for 21 years. I started as a kinship caseworker in one of the provider agencies in New York City, and I served in various capacities after that position. I then transitioned into the New York State Office of Children and Family Services as a contract staff, and I started there doing permanency and adoption work. Currently, I'm doing training, technical assistance, and supporting the regional office as well as provider agencies and the local DSS in the region. This is my agenda for today. And so we're also going to be looking at data for New York State in regards to kinship placements. Kinship Overview, Keeping the Kin Connection is the name of the training that I created. We'll also look at the PICO question for my action research project. We'll look at some highlights of literature review, go through the methodology. We'll also look at the needs assessment results and the training results. We'll also have pieces of the Keeping the Kin Connection training as a part of this presentation. And then we'll look at the pilot test feedback from the participants who took the training. I'll also talk about my next steps and the MPLD impact from the program. So I want to share these two quotes that I found in my training development journey. The first one is, "Family gives you the roots to stand tall and strong." And this is by Unknown. And it made me think of a family tree. The second one by Michael J. Fox is, "Family is not an important thing, it's everything." And this one was actually included in the training. I started off the training by giving the kinship care definition. So the full-time care of children by grandparents, aunts, uncles, or other blood relatives, or by an adult related by marriage or adoption, or a godparent, a close family friend, or someone with a significant connection to the child or youth. So just a little background. New York State has 6 regional offices, and they are located in Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, the Capital Region area, Westchester, and New York City. The regional offices have oversight and monitoring of kinship practice for the local Department of Social Services in each of the regions and voluntary agencies in each of the regions. The regional office staff should be well-versed in family finding strategies and available kinship caregiver resources in New York State in order to support the local Department of Social Services and voluntary agencies in the regions. Kinship placement should be the first consideration and placement option when a child has to be removed. As of December 31st, 2021, 34% of the children placed in New York State were placed with kinship caregivers. So now I want to look at some data, and this is our foster care numbers in New York State as of December 31st, 2021. So you'll see that it is broken out by the ethnicity of the children, and we had a total of 15,245 children placed in care at the end of December 31st, 2021. This next data set shows the kinship placements in New York State as of December 31st, 2021. It shows the total number of children in care that were placed with kinship, and it shows the total number of children in care that were not placed with kinship. And once again, the total number was 34%, or 5,122 children and youth. So this is my PICO statement. With increased knowledge of kinship resources and the benefits of kinship placement, will the regional office staff be able to support the counties and provider agencies in promoting kinship placements for children and youth who come into care? And so the PICO statement says, if regional office staff receive effective, efficient, and accessible self-paced training regarding kinship resources and the importance of kin as a placement support resource? Will it increase their knowledge, confidence, and comfort regarding the use of resources needed to improve kinship placements in New York State? These are a few highlighted points from the literature reviews. They are both supporting kinship care, and they also show some drawbacks of kinship care. So children and youth who are able to keep connections to family, siblings, community, and culture have less disruptions when they are placed in care. They have a positive identity formation. They're able to keep familial connections and traditions. Also scored significantly higher in math and marginally in reading scores. And kin should continue to be prioritized in policy and practice. Potential adverse effects: the environment may not be good, reading scores may decrease, poor academic supports and resources, and less support services and training for kin caregivers. I want to touch on a few of these points. For children who spent 50% or more of their time in out-of-home care in a kinship placement, they scored significantly lower on baseline internalizing and externalizing behavior problems. Some examples of these behaviors for externalizing might be lying or defiance, maybe even physical assault. For the internalizing behaviors, some of those examples might be sadness or fears, anxiety, shame. They also scored significantly higher in math and marginally in reading scores, as I mentioned before. And this was all out of a study from Font. The results of Font's study suggest that both the adverse effects and the potential benefits of kin placement are concentrated within a subgroup of children who were already lower functioning at baseline. So that means children that were faring worse on their initial well-being measures saw a greater decline in academic achievement and a greater improvement in their behavior when placed with kinship. So now I want to go through the methodology in creating the Keeping the Kin Connection training. So there was an 8-question training needs assessment that was created. This training needs assessment was sent to the regional office directors to then forward to staff within the 6 regional offices. Once the staff completed the assessment, the results were returned, and those results were generated into a report. Once the report was complete, the report was analyzed, looking at where the strengths were and where the needs were. After that, the learning objectives were created, and the learning objectives helped to outline or structure the training content. So the report results also helped to identify what content would be included in the training. So the learning objectives for the training were created, and then the training content developed. And I wanted to ensure that the training gave an overview of kinship care and that it also included useful resources. A feedback survey was also created to capture the experience of the training and what the participants that took the training came away with. It was also incorporated at the end of the training so that I didn't have to do a lot of follow-up emails or kind of find folks to give me feedback from the training. So we are currently looking at the results of the training needs assessments that came back from the regional offices. So we had 10 people to respond from the regional offices, and we did have one more that was added. So we did have a total of 11. And now we are looking at some of the needs assessment results. So respondents were asked how much training they were needed, and the scale that they used were a lot of training, quite a bit of training, some training, a little training, or I don't need training. So that was the scale that was used for the needs assessment. Their responses showed that training was needed on topics that I had gathered from the literature reviews. And one example was how implicit bias can impact the efforts towards kinship placement. You'll see that 80% of the responses needed training or some training on that topic. So now I want to talk about the intervention, which is the Keeping the Kin Connection training. This is a kinship care overview training. And it was created to onboard new regional office staff, or it could serve as a refresher training for some of the more seasoned staff. This training aimed to promote kinship placements for youth entering care. And so I started off with the definition of kinship care so that everyone is aware who can be a caretaker. It aims to equip regional office staff in supporting the counties and the districts in the various regions and increasing kinship placements. And in the training, there is information around resources that are available for kinship caregivers. The training was piloted to New York State staff, also New York MPLD alumni, and then we also had some trainers from the professional development program that also piloted the training. So these are the learning objectives from the Keeping the Kin Connection training. And once again, it helped to structure the content as the training was being developed. And this is, of course, at the beginning of the training. And so we're going to start looking at some pieces of the training. Some additional details was that the training ran for about an hour long, and this included time for the feedback survey to be completed. The participants, once again, included New York State regional office staff, trainers from professional development program, and New York State MPLD alumni. And I brainstormed with my supervisor who would be available and who I could actually ask to pilot this training. The training was remote. It was available on the Litmus platform for approximately 2 weeks. And so those that agreed to pilot the training had 2 weeks to complete the training on Litmus. So next, I'm going to give you a sample of a video also used in the training by Adrian McLemore. Adrian McLemore talks about his lived experience in foster care, as well as his experience as a foster parent, kinship foster parent to his niece and his nephew.
But what I want you to take away from our interaction today is that you don't have to be a kin care provider and go out, buy bunk beds and fill your fridge with pizza rolls and Lunchables. I didn't do that. Okay, I did that. You can be a kin care provider in your own way every day. You need 3 attributes. The first is you have to be keen. You have to be eager. It's exciting, it's rewarding, it's challenging. One day you're making big decisions like their health and safety. The next day could be decisions concerning what color hair ties do I have today. Second, you must be informed. I believe we must do a better job of asking more questions and seeking more answers. Part of the problem in our society today is that we tend to always put our best selves forward. We always tend to put our best foot forward publicly, so when a crisis emerges, it often catches us off guard. Kinship is about being there for those around you. It's not by yourself. I remember doing my niece's hair one time, or trying to do my niece's hair one time. After 3 hours of my first and only attempt, my niece and I reached a compromise, which involved me never touching her hair again. But I would pack her hair bag and her teachers were here for her at school. The last thing you should know is that you should be flexible. You must be able to think quickly on your feet and expect the unexpected. That's it. And I submit to you that everyone in here possesses these 3 attributes. This is one of my favorite pictures of my niece and nephew. Aww. They were back at home with their mom. I had picked them up to hang out. And as I was sitting there watching them have this conversation, I realized that this is what it was all about. They were never with strangers. They were never separated. In this photo, my nephew was explaining his first day of school to his big sister. This is the essence of why it's important to maintain relationships within our communities and maintain relationships within our families. As you think about the current issues that plague our society today, I ask you to think about what role do you play? We're all teachers, mentors, coaches, and we're all kinship care providers in our own.
So once again, that was Adrian McLemore. And you can watch the entirety of this video on YouTube. And it's called Everyone Provides Kinship Care. So next in the training after the video, there is a 3 connections activity. So the aim and goal of this activity is to have the participants really think about the importance of the kinship connection. And so participants are asked to take out a piece of paper, write down 3 of their closest connections in broad terms. And as you can see, I have 4 examples of areas that one might have as connections. Participants are then asked to one by one cross off a connection until they have 1 connection left. And usually family is the connection that's left, or something tied to family is usually the connection that is left. And so I drive home the point by saying we have the opportunity to cross off our connections and have family left. However, when children and youth come into care, family oftentimes is the first connection they lose. And this happens when child welfare professionals do not seek other family to care for the children and youth that come into care. So this is a sample of one of the scenarios that's included in the training. There are 3 with different kinship scenarios or kinship circumstances that's included in the training. And one thing to note is that all of the families in these scenarios are real. Then after each scenario, there are processing questions. And these processing questions are important as they ask the participants to either identify engagement strategies, identify diligent efforts, asking questions about how did engaging kin impact the child's permanency, what benefits did they identify? And so once again, these are, this is a training for regional office staff, and these would be some of the questions that they would ask themselves in a review of a case. So next, we're going to look at some training results. So I actually was able to get some live feedback from some of the folks who were taking the training. Other feedback was that the slides were too dense with information. So that's something that I definitely have to consider. Other feedback included that there wasn't enough focus on case review, or there wasn't enough focus on data. And so while there was some in there, that's something to consider when I update the training. So these are some other results from the feedback survey. So once again, we had 11 people who completed the training. And the range of the responses went from agreed to strongly agree. The other options were strongly agree, agree, neither agree or disagree, and strongly disagree. So as we can see, 100% of the participants said that the training explained the various types of kinship options. And then there were several responses under the 80 to 90%. So review case records to identify gaps in kinship practice was covered, explaining general information on the kinship resource centers local to their region, such as the Kinship Navigator, being able to explain what the Kinship Navigator is to the local Department of Social Services and voluntary agencies in their region. Also, understanding how implicit bias can affect or impacts the efforts towards kinship placements. Also understanding the roles of the kinship champion and the kinship specialist, which is specific to New York City for supporting kinship work. So these 3 responses tie directly back to my PICO, asked about whether knowledge was increased after taking the training to improve kinship placements in New York State. And you can see that we got responses in the neither agree nor disagree category, agree and strongly agree. Confidence regarding the use of resources needed to improve kinship placements in New York State. And so once again, you can see the numbers that we received in response there. And then comfort regarding the use of resources needed to improve kinship placements in New York State. And you can see the numbers there. So these responses were from the pilot testers regarding their experience of the course. So 3 of the points were, was the content clear? The next one, the vocabulary and terminology used, were they cleared? And that was definitely important to ensure that everyone was clear, that maybe there weren't acronyms that threw anyone off, or if we needed to expound or expand on any of the terminology used. And then the last one, whether the course was engaging. And I see that we had some responses in strongly agree, and I also see disagree. And in analyzing that, I do recall that there were quite a few responses around navigating the platform, which might have lent to that response. So what's next? I plan to share and debrief the pilot and the results from the assessments and the feedback with my supervisor and training team. I want to update the training based on the feedback that I received from the participants who took the pilot. And then this training is actually being considered to be a part of the state's onboarding training that will be offered to new regional office staff. So here I want to highlight some of the impacts from my participation in the MPLD program. So MPLD was definitely a stretching and growing experience for me. I learned a lot about the kinship work going on in New York State, and that there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of increasing kinship placements and increasing the importance of kinship placements throughout the state. During the time that I was in the MPLD program, there were definitely a lot of competing priorities throughout the program. So I learned to better organize and prioritize tasks that needed to be accomplished. The training development process was something that I learned, and it definitely helped me to see behind the scenes what happens when training is being developed, and to understand that it will take several tries before a final product is complete. So in regards to the individual coaching sessions, they allowed me to reflect on my leadership skills and definitely on my practice and professional growth. It was definitely a learning experience, and I appreciated the individual coaching time. Working with my advisors on my action research project highlighted the importance of collaborating. Working with my advisors also helped me in working through my action research project, and the action research project was a big project that I hope will definitely increase kinship placements in the state and further the kinship work in the state. So here I'm sharing my references, references to the study and some of the information in the literature review. Here the references are continued, and the first one is to the video, Everyone Provides Kinship Care, featuring Adrienne McLemore, and that can be found on YouTube. I want to thank you all very much for listening to my presentation today.